My family ignored me for 20 years and spoiled my sister. But when my parents stole $50,000 from my college fund to pay for her parties and brand new car, I sued them and the judge forced them to sell everything they had. Now they're broke and she's working at a coffee shop. I'm 20 years old, studying architecture in college, and I need to tell this story because I basically just destroyed my family, or that's what everyone tells me. But the truth is they destroyed me first for years and years, and nobody seemed to notice or care. What happened a few months ago with my college money was just the straw that broke the camel's back, you know? But to understand all of this, I have to go back, like way back to when I was a kid, because this goes way back. I grew up with my younger sister, Brittany, who's 18 now, and for as long as I can remember, she was always my parents' golden child. And when I say golden child, I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. It was like the sun rose wherever she walked, and I was just, I don't know, a piece of furniture cluttering up the house. Brittany wanted ballet classes. They'd pay for the best ones. Brittany wanted the newest iPhone. They'd buy it for her on launch day. I'd ask for school supplies, and my mom would tell me to use last year's because they still worked. It was like that with everything. Literally everything. And the worst part is that if I complained or said anything, I automatically became the selfish one. The troublemaker, the one who didn't understand that things cost money. But curiously, money always appeared when it came to Brittany. And it wasn't just material stuff. You know what I mean? It was the attention, the affection, everything. My parents went to all of Brittany's recitals, all her gymnastics competitions. They'd sit front row with cameras and signs. I was on the school debate team. I won second place in a state tournament when I was 14, and my parents didn't even go because that same day Brittany had a regular gymnastics practice. Not a competition or anything special, just a normal Tuesday practice. I remember my teacher drove me home afterwards and asked where my parents were, and I told her they had something important. And she looked at me with that pity face I hate. That face that says she knows exactly what's going on but can't do anything about it. What made everything worse is that I was always blamed for everything. If something broke in the house, I had done it. If money was missing, I had taken it. If Brittany came crying saying I'd been mean to her, even if it was completely made up, I'd be punished without them even asking for my side. One time, I think I was like 15, Brittany took my mom's credit card and bought herself like $800 worth of clothes online. When the statement came and my mom saw it, she immediately accused me. She screamed at me, called me a thief, said I was a disappointment, and how dare I steal from her after everything they'd done for me, which was ironic considering they'd done practically nothing for me. I kept telling them it wasn't me, that I didn't even know the card number, but nobody believed me. My dad told me they were going to take away my phone, my laptop, everything, until I paid the money back. And I was there crying, and screaming that it wasn't me. And Brittany was standing in the corner of the living room with this little smirk. And I saw her and I knew it had been her. I told my parents to check the orders, to look at the shipping addresses, to look at the clothing sizes that wouldn't even fit me. But my mom just kept yelling and my dad sent me to my room saying I was grounded until further notice. 2 weeks later, the boxes arrived, all addressed to Brittany. My mom opened them and found all the clothes. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Brittany said it had been a mistake, that she thought mom had given her permission to use the card. My mom told her it's okay, just be more careful next time, and that was it. They never apologized to me. They didn't even tell me I was right to doubt, or that they'd been wrong. It was like all the drama from the previous 2 weeks had never happened, except I was still somehow the bad guy. That day something broke inside me. Like really, broke. I went to my grandparents' house. Well, my grandpa and grandma on my dad's side. They lived like 20 minutes from our house. My grandma had always been like my refuge. She was the only person who seemed to really see me, you know? Who noticed when I was sad or when something was bothering me. I showed up at their house crying and told her everything, and she hugged me and told me something I'll never forget. She told me my parents were blind but that she saw me, that I was worth more than they could recognize. My grandpa was there too, and after I calmed down a bit, he took me to his study and closed the door. He told me he'd noticed the favoritism for years, that it wasn't my imagination or me being dramatic. He told me he'd fought with my dad about this several times, but my dad always denied it or got defensive. And then my grandpa told me something that changed everything. He told me that when I was ready to go to college, he was going to make sure I could go, that he'd I've been saving money in a special account for me because he knew my parents probably weren't going to help me. I cried even more. But, from relief this time, I felt for the first time in I don't know how many years that someone really cared about me, that someone was on my side. That night, I stayed over at my grandparents' house, and when my mom called asking where I was, my grandma told her I was there and that I was going to stay a few days. My mom tried to protest, but my grandma basically hung up the phone on her. Those few days became permanent. At 16, I officially moved in with my grandparents. My parents put up a little resistance at first, not because they missed me or really cared, but because, what would the neighbors say? What would the family think? How would it look that their oldest daughter had abandoned them? But my grandparents were firm. They told my parents that either they let me stay with them or they were going to start talking openly about the treatment they gave me. And my parents caved quickly because God forbid anyone know the truth about them. The 2 years I lived with my grandparents were the best years of my life up to that point. My grandma taught me to cook. My grandpa helped me with math. They took me to my school events, celebrated my achievements. It was like living in a completely different world. My parents called me sometimes. Well, my dad called mainly to make me feel guilty, saying things like I'd broken the family, that my mom cried for me every night, which I knew was a lie because my mom hadn't cried for me once in my life. Sometimes I'd go visit them, mainly because my grandparents told me I should maintain at least some relationship. But the visits were always awkward and cold. And Brittany acted like I was a stranger who'd come to visit. Then the worst thing happened. During my senior year of high school, my grandpa died. The heart attack, completely unexpected. He was like 68 years old and in perfect health as far as anyone knew. It was devastating. Absolutely devastating. And then, like 6 months later, my grandma died too. The doctors said it was a stroke, but I know it was really from a broken heart. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. She just couldn't go on without him. Losing them was like losing everything again. They were my real family, the only people who had really loved me unconditionally. The funeral was horrible. My parents were there acting like the main mourners when they'd barely visited my grandparents in the last 2 years. Brittany was taking selfies in the funeral home bathroom. I swear, I saw her. After the funeral came the reading of the will. My grandparents left me their house and left me the savings account my grandpa had mentioned, which ended up being like $55,000 specifically designated for my college education. They also left me some of their furniture and personal items. They left my parents some minor things, and Brittany nothing specific because, well, my grandparents knew exactly what the situation was. My dad got furious, like really furious. He said it wasn't fair, that the house should be his because he was their son, that the money should be divided equitably among the whole family. But the will was clear and legal, and there was nothing he could do. My mom whined about how could my grandparents do this, that I had manipulated them in their last years, which was ridiculous because they'd made that will years before they died. And I didn't even know the specific details until that moment. I decided to keep living in my grandparents' house. I sold some furniture I didn't need, updated some things, and made it my space. I started college that fall studying architecture, which had always been my dream. I paid for the first year with money from the fund, plus some scholarships I'd gotten. Things were going well. Better than well, actually. For the first time in my life, I felt free and in control of my destiny. Then came time to pay for my second. A year, I went to the bank to make a withdrawal from the education fund my grandparents had set up, and that's when my world collapsed again. The account balance was $5,000. $5,000, when there should have been like $40,000 still, after using $15,000 the first year. I stood there, staring at the bank computer screen, thinking there was an error, that maybe I was looking at the wrong account. But it wasn't an error. I asked the bank employee to show me the transaction history, and there it was, clear as day. 3 large withdrawals over the past 9 months. One for $25,000, another for $15,000, and another for $10,000. And guess who had made them? My dad. Technically, his name was still on the account as a co-signer from when the account was originally opened, something my grandparents probably forgot to change, and he'd used that to take the money out. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. The bank employee was asking me if I was okay, and I could only shake my head. I took the papers with the transaction history and left the bank like a zombie. I sat in my car in the parking lot and just stayed there for I don't know how long, maybe an hour, Just looking at those numbers, those withdrawals, that betrayal documented on paper. Finally, I gathered enough composure to drive to my parents' house. I didn't call first. I just showed up. I knocked on the door and my mom opened it. And when she saw me, her face immediately showed guilt, like she knew instantly why I was there. I went in without waiting for an invitation and found my dad in the living room watching TV. I threw the bank papers in his lap and said, "What the fuck is this?" He looked at the papers, didn't even seem surprised or sorry, just tired, and said they could explain. My mom started with this story about how Brittany had wanted a really special Sweet 16 party, that it was once in a lifetime, that it was important to her, and that the party had cost more than they expected, like $25,000 because they'd rented an elegant hall, hired a famous DJ, had gourmet food for 200 people, $25,000 on a party, for a girl who already had everything. But it didn't end there. Oh no. Part of the money was also used to buy Brittany a new car for her 17th birthday, a brand new Honda Accord, because apparently she didn't want something used. And they'd also paid for a family trip to Europe last summer, 2 weeks touring France and Italy, a trip I obviously didn't go on or get invited to. I screamed at them, asked them how they dared, how they could steal my college money, the money my grandparents had worked hard to save specifically for me, to waste it on luxuries for Brittany. My dad had the nerve to say it wasn't stealing because technically his name was on the account, and that besides I already had my grandparents' house which was worth a lot of money, so I shouldn't be so selfish. My mom added that I probably wasn't going to finish college anyway, that architecture was a difficult career, and maybe I should consider something more practical, and that the money had been used for the family, that Brittany was family too and deserved to have nice things. I told them Brittany had had nice things her whole life while I had nothing, that this money was specifically for my education, that my grandparents had left it to me. My dad stood up and told me I was being dramatic, that they were going to pay the money back eventually, that they just needed time. I asked him when exactly were they going to return $50,000? And he had no answer. My mom started crying, saying I was destroying the family. How could I be so cruel? That they'd done their best raising me. Brittany came down the stairs at that moment, probably from all the commotion, and asked them what was going on. When I told her they'd stolen my college money to pay for her ridiculous party and her car and her vacation, she just shrugged and said, "Well, it's not like you really needed it. You already have a house. A house. As if that paid my tuition, my books, my food." I left there and went straight to consult with a lawyer. I used part of the $5,000 that was left to pay for the initial consultation. The lawyer reviewed all the documents, my grandparents' will, the bank papers, everything, and told me I had a solid case. The will clearly specified the money was for my education, and even though my dad's name was technically on the account as a cosigner, he'd violated the intent of the will by using the money for other purposes. I sued my parents. It wasn't an easy decision, but what other option did I have? I needed that money to finish my degree, and they clearly had no intention of voluntarily returning it. The lawsuit caused a massive family scandal. Uncles, aunts, cousins. Everyone started calling me, sending me messages telling me, how could I do this to my family? That I was destroying them? That I was selfish and ungrateful? Some relatives on my mom's side stopped talking to me completely. My dad tried to make me look like the bad guy to everyone, saying I was ruining their lives out of pure spite, that he was my father and deserved respect. My mom posted vague things on Facebook about ungrateful children and family betrayal, clearly directed at me. Brittany sent me horrible text messages, calling me a bitch and saying she hoped I went to hell, that I was ruining her life, but I went ahead with the lawsuit. The legal process lasted months, like 6 or 7 months of hearings and filing documents and constant stress. I had to take out student loans to cover my second year while all this was being resolved. My lawyer was good, really good, and we had all the evidence on our side. The will was clear, the bank withdrawals were documented, and my parents basically admitted they'd used the money for things unrelated to my education. Finally, the judge ruled in my favor. He ordered my parents to return the full minces, $50,000 plus interest and legal costs, ending up being like $56,000 total. My parents didn't have that money in cash, obviously, because they'd spent it all. So the judge ordered them to sell assets to pay. That meant Brittany's car. Brittany's brand new Honda Accord was sold. They also had to sell some of my mom's jewelry, some expensive furniture they'd bought recently, and basically liquidate anything of value they had. Brittany was hysterical, calling and leaving voicemail messages screaming and crying about how I'd ruined her life, that now she didn't have a car, that her friends were making fun of her. When I finally received the money, every cent of those $56,000, I cut all contact. I blocked my parents' numbers, Brittany's number, blocked everyone on social media. I told the few relatives who still talked to me that I didn't want to hear anything about my parents or Brittany, that they were dead to me. It's been like 4 months since then. I've heard through my aunt, the only relative on my dad's side who still talks to me and secretly supports me, that things are bad for them. Brittany had to get a job at a coffee shop because my parents can no longer pay for everything she wants. Apparently, she hates working, complains constantly, but has no choice. I also heard my parents can't pay for her full college now after having to sell everything and pay legal costs. So Brittany's going to have to go to a community college instead of the expensive state university she wanted. My dad sent me an email like a month ago from a new address I hadn't blocked yet. The email said they'd learned their lesson, that they understood they'd made a mistake, and if I could find it in my heart to forgive them. And then, at the end of the email, he asked if I could lend them money to help with Brittany's tuition. That after all, she was my sister and it would be the right thing to do. I deleted the email without responding. I don't owe them anything. Not forgiveness, not money, not my time, nothing. They had 20 years to treat me like their daughter and they chose not to. They chose Brittany again and again and again. And when I finally tried to claim the one thing that was mine, the one thing my grandparents had secured for me, they stole it from me without thinking twice. People ask me if I feel bad, if I regret suing my own parents. And the honest answer is no, not even a little bit. Sometimes I feel sad about how things turned out, like sad that it had to come to this, but I don't regret my actions. I did what I had to do to protect myself and to honor the memory of my grandparents, the only people who really loved me. Now I'm in my 3rd year of architecture. My grades are excellent. I have an amazing internship for next summer. I live in the house my grandparents left me. I've filled it with plants and art, and things that make me happy. I have real friends, a life I built, a life nobody can take away from me, and that's enough.